So our guest today is the executive director of the brand new Ed Kaplan Family Institute for Innovation and Tech Entrepreneurship, which is now being built on the campus of IIT. He has been, our guest today has been described as, quote, something of a godfather of Chicago's tech scene, unquote, and, quote, the public face of Chicago's tech community. Our guest today earned his undergraduate and law degree from Northwestern University. And this is just for me on a personal note. Howard is a hero of mine, and here's why. He lives his mission and his mission-driven life, and he does what gives him happiness in life. And for me, it's an incredibly admirable characteristic, admirable way to live his life. He is a husband, father, grandfather, serial entrepreneur, educator, venture investor, author, former CEO of 1871, president of Tribeca Flashpoint College and Kendall College, and on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, Howard Tullman. All right, Howard, let's have fun.
Wow, thank you, Jay. I'm really pleased to be here. I think I've been here for 12 years running. I keep track of it by how many kids Jay has under the age of 6. I think he has about 14 now. Would that be about right? Okay, so that's how I keep score. Anyway, I am pleased to be here, and I'm happy to have a group from IIT here as well. Let me tell you just briefly about the Ed Kaplan building, and it's an amazing structure. Just show you a couple of sort of images of what's going on. About 70,000 square feet, and the intention is, and it is in fact the first new academic building on the campus of IIT in about 40 years. It opens officially on October 25th. We're pretty excited. It does look a little bit like it flies off of the earth, and we hope that that's a symbol of sort of our aspirations for it. And by the way, nobody knows exactly what's going to go on there. So this is the famous bunch of blind people feeling an elephant slide, which is everybody thinks it's a little bit different. We think that it's going to be a hub, so it'll be central to the campus in terms of education and in terms of immersive experiences and hands-on learning. And also it'll extend to all the rest of the colleges at the school, and also to extend IIT's presence across the whole city. And the intention in calling it the Factory of the Future is to think of it as a machine and also a magnet. The machine is to help us turn ideas into invoices. And this has been something that has been important for the city for a very long time, and also to provide everything in between. And this thing about ideas is, and this is one of my favorite quotes. It's from the guy who founded Atari a million years ago, Nolan Bushnell. But it's really true. It's great to have ideas. I think everybody has ideas almost every single day. The trick is, how do you build a culture? How do you build a system and an environment where you turn those from dreams and imagination into real life, and then transformation, and do different things. So we see the Kaplan Institute as sort of a magnet, the cherry on top of this institution that's fairly new, about 127 years new. And the intention is to pool students and faculty and opportunities and everything you can imagine there. And one of the aspects of this that's important is, and we know this from the 500 companies and the 2,000 people a day at 1871, that nothing is the future forever, that time has a way of taking even the best institutions and sort of converting them over time. If you don't keep moving, if you don't change, you die in the world today. And what's important is to figure out, how do you manage these remarkable transitions, but at the same time acknowledge and appreciate what has come before, and how do you refresh those things, and how do you bring those things forward to combine the best of the past with the best of the future. And that's really sort of what we think the Kaplan Institute represents. IIT has always been sort of a one-stop shop. It's had great technical training, but also the whole idea of experiential learning has been really central to what's going on. This idea of hands-on, which today is really popular, but it wasn't so popular in the past. But in addition, what you find in Bronzeville and in the sort of surrounding community is a commitment as well to giving back to society and to connecting to society. So I say all the time that talk is cheap, but it's the actions and it's getting started. And we have our both our current provost and our new provost here, who already is complaining that I continue to harass him and he hasn't even started his job. So Peter, my apologies, but I don't think the emails will stop. The other thing, though, that you learn, and we learn this at Kendall, and you learn this in life, which is top-down is a great theory, but it's not how the world works. It really is important that you incorporate and you pull everybody into this world. And you know, change is an interesting thing too in this time. People don't change because a lightning bolt strikes them or an apple hits them on the head. They change when they feel the pressure of what's going on around them. And honestly, the heat in education is on, and it couldn't be more pressing right now that we look at education and we look at what are the tools, what is the future that we're going to have to create. And it's not easy. And we know that, you know, there's a lot of anxiety sort of associated with it. But here's the truth. It's better to be a little nervous than it is to disappear. And for those of you who are following this conversation on your BlackBerries, you have my sympathy to give you some idea. But let me explain a formulation that's a little closer to home and that I think is really interesting. And this is something that I don't think people realize. The music industry has been decimated. We understand that. It's been decimated because nobody is buying, well, actually, a little vinyl is being sold again. But the idea was that vinyl just fell off a cliff. And yet, what is so interesting is that nobody stopped listening to music. So what happened to music? Well, what happened was that basically the consumption of these physical objects diminished, but access grew because people wanted to continue to listen to music. It was that essential to their lives. And it's the same with education. It's absolutely the same with education. And the trick is we better figure out what the new ways are that education is going to meet the needs of this new generation. Alternative ways of delivering what we do, digital ways, different locations, dispersed solutions. Because today in this world of lifetime learning, nobody owns the student, nobody owns the customer. You earn that right every single day because in the world we live in, what's so interesting is that the choices are unlimited. And loyalty and this idea of sunk cost and committed and signed up and stuff like that, we have a new definition. It's a little depressing, a definition of loyalty. It's basically, it says, I'm loyal until I see something better. Now that's until something better comes along. Now, that's not hard to sort of understand, but what's so interesting is it raises a different kind of obligation, which is we have to earn it. We have to actually deliver concrete results. We have to prepare, as Alan says all the time, we have to prepare these students for success in the future. It's not the grades they get in a given course. It's how are they going to do in the world and how are they going to have the skills that are going to be essential and critical to the future. So change is what we live with today. We call this autocatalytic. What that means is that the rate of change is such that every single change accelerates the next change coming down the pipeline. And organizations today have to ask a slightly different question. It's not simply how responsive you are today, which is a question of velocity for the physics guys in the room, but it's a question of acceleration. How fast are you getting faster? And if you look around, if the rate of change outside of your environment is faster than your own, then you're headed in the wrong direction. And here's something to tell your kids, which is that today the rate of change is the slowest that it will be for the whole rest of our lives. The slowest. And that's how the world works today. And the thing that we learn in racing, the thing we learn in the real world, is that they don't wait for you. And neither does the world. And so we've got this amazing jewel of a campus. We have this opportunity, 15 minutes, from the Loop. And being there is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because of the enormous resources, and it's a curse because change is hard. And the fact that things worked for you so well in the past, what we know now is that you're going to have to also look at the future and say, how do I do things differently, and how do I change the world? And I know that this is a complex set of discussions. And yet, at the same time, I also know that basically nothing moves by itself unless it's headed in the wrong direction. So we didn't build a $40 million building. We didn't start this sort of new adventure to just be so what, And frankly, I take this very personally because it's okay to have a business that's just lousy, but it's not okay to do a mediocre job of educating people for the future because you're mortgaging their futures. And if you don't do a good job, then shame on you. And so I didn't say this was going to be easy. I don't think this is going to be easy. And we're signing up to do a lot of new and important and radically different things, but it is going to be something that I would say all day long is worth it. And it's a hard thing. It's not sort of a magical little thing. It's an every single day thing that you have to continue to move a little bit forward. It's a very incremental thing. But it's a little bit also because the world is spinning so quickly, like changing the engine on a car while it's racing around. And the other thing that you realize about the inevitability of this kind of change is you don't get to take a break. You don't get to say, I'll slow down for a while, because if you do, they just roll right over you. So a lot of us in every industry and every business face this same challenge, which is what we did for years and years isn't going to work. What we did in the recent past is not going to be meaningful going forward, because the future isn't going to be a little different. The future is going to be radically different, and we can see that. But it's interesting that when you see these new models, your brain sort of goes into a hyperspeed mode, and you can't unsee these things. And so when we present these visions of the future, we're signing up for those, because people can't say, I prefer the old way of doing things, because those are gone. And I always like to give sort of a visual example of this issue of things you can see and can't unsee. So I'm going to show you something, and half of you, because your eyes read from right to left, are going to say, I see what kind of animal this is. And the other half of you are going to say, no, it's a completely different animal. And the truth is that once you've looked at this image, some of you are going to say it's a duck, and some are going to say it's a rabbit. But the fact is that going forward, you will see both for the rest of your lives, okay? So innovation is this idea that we look at things, we look at the way things have been done forever, and we see slightly different things. Amazon, a popular conversation around here. I love that in the earliest days of Amazon, Jeff Bezos was very, very innovative and sort of clever and sneaky in the same way. And Amazon's original business was selling books, and he had to buy these books from the big distributors, and the entire business model was, I'll buy them from the distributors and I'll sell them to people, which didn't seem like much of a business at the time. But what happened was that the distributors had a very peculiar requirement, which was that you had to buy 10 books. That was the minimum order. And of course, he didn't have the kind of volume in those early days where 10 books would be ordered of a single book. But he found out a very interesting thing, which was that the requirement was just that you had to order the books. You had to order 10 books at a time. So he looked through the entire catalog of all the books that were out there and found the least popular book in the history of mankind, which is about lichens of some kind. And for 2 years running, he ordered 10 books, 9 of which were the lichen book, and 1 was the book that he needed. And of course, they shipped it because it wasn't about paying for the books, it was about ordering the books. And so to this day, that book is still out of print. I want you to know Amazon still has it out there, but it's still out of print. So this thing about entrepreneurs is a perception thing. And one of the things that we know is that you don't change the past by doing it a little different. You change it by a new vision and sort of a new idea. And that's really what we think this is. So let me tell you a little bit about sort of what went into the process. First, why? Why did you build this thing? And I think it's pretty clear that when we see conversations around here, we need more scientists, we need more designers, we need more engineers than ever before. We need them to be entrepreneurial, we need them to be diverse, which is a challenge, and innovative. And then what we know for sure today is that you can't innovate in a vacuum, you can't innovate without being inclusive. And so part of this was to say, well, where's a resource, where's an opportunity that lets us really capitalize on those needs? A third of the venture-backed companies in the United States that went public in the last few years had at least one immigrant founder. Immigrants have started over half of what are known as in the tech industry as the unicorns, and immigrants make up about 15% of our population, but about 25% of our entrepreneurs. At IIT, about 26% of the incoming class are from underrepresented populations, about 32% are women, and more than 25% are first-generation college. And this is really powerful because in bringing them in and in giving them a vision of a different kind of future, we have a group of people that are hungry, that are interested and passionate, that are hardworking, right around the corner and available now. So all of the companies that are constantly coming to me and saying, gee, we wish we could get some diverse talent, get on the red line and take a little trip south, okay? And don't do it, by the way, because you're a good sport or a good Samaritan. Don't do it for some charitable reason. Do it because it's selfish, because you need smart, technically trained engineers and scientists. And that's what we have in this jewel, and we see the Kaplan Institute as being basically the front door of this opportunity. And if you don't think the world is changing, let me just tell you that it's changing, and it's changing really radically. And so if I look at your job and I can reduce it to a set of instructions, or if I say, gee, do that over and over again all day long, and I wish you do it really well, those jobs are doomed. Those jobs are doomed. Today, we reward knowledge more than ever before. And in fact, what we really reward is innovation and creativity and the idea of new things, because in this world of just looking sort of for traditional employees, they aren't going to cut it anymore. And so it's going to be a different future. So number one was, why did we build it? Number two was, where did we build it? In the middle of the first and only tech-centric university in the city, right smack in the middle. That's where we live. The new building is rising. And in a place where the first interprofessional programs, what we call the iPro programs, were begun, where experiential learning and immersive experiences and cross-disciplinary learning was central to the whole university's being. It was one of the core differentiations. And again, the Kaplan Institute is intended to bring together all of these different disciplines, because today, if you're talking about human-robotic interaction, or you're talking about any of these kinds of things, the silos don't work anymore. It's not a single discipline. You're going to have to bring together all these things. So in building it there, we took into account three things. We're literally looking at this future where we're training people for jobs that don't even exist, to use tools that we hope will be invented soon, and by the way, by our engineers and by our scientists, to solve problems that we're not even sure are problems today. And what we know for sure is that this is going to have to be across the disciplines. These are horizontal solutions, and that the silos are going to be too narrow to address the complexity of these new kinds of problems and programs. And lastly, that when you build an institute like this, where you bring together all these resources, you create a really peculiar and wonderful opportunity where you have access to the top talent, where you can recruit and build programs that create internships and apprenticeships and co-op opportunities, all of this. And the other thing that's important as well is, how do you attract the students? How do you attract these top students? And what we know is a couple of things. They want to work on important projects. They want to work with other talented people. And this is just beginning. And frankly, the next decade, the new businesses, the startup businesses that we see, are going to be driven by technical solutions, by engineers and scientists. At the heart of these things will be technology and innovation. and not, I'm sorry to say, services that help you brush your teeth. And as much as we are very supportive of the animal community, I don't think we need too many more dog and pet dating sites. So the thought is, what do you need, and what is the future going to look like? Well, it's going to be tech-centric. It's going to be STEM-centered. It's going to be all about manufacturing and building and creating new kinds of tools. And it's going to bring together the Internet of everything and all kinds of new realities and all of these different kinds of solutions, whether it's changing education or medicine or any of these different things. All of those are going to be obligations of the next 10 years of companies, because it's not going to be enough to just say, well, this is convenient or this is nice to have. It's going to be what is essential and really critical going forward. And so it can be a vast variety of different things. Machine learning, the machines are actually getting better than we are now at facial recognition. And if you think that it's easy to do facial recognition, let me tell you that the difference between the dog and the muffin is very challenging. And so this is just one of the areas where we think we have some real opportunities. And whether it's blueberry or raspberry doesn't really matter. All right, anyway. And so what do you build in a place like this? Well, you build the technologists of tomorrow, the entrepreneurial engineers, you build startup scientists and people that are going to be leaders. And then how do you build it? Well, you start with what you have, and we have an enormous start, and Ed Kaplan is here, and I want to thank Ed because he and his and so first you start with what you have, and second you get started, it's important, and then you know that in this new world you're sort of jumping off and changing your parachute midway down, because we can't get all the details right. So what do you aim for? Well, you aim for a place that's inspirational and that's sort of aspirational as well. You build a team that is committed to hard work and that models this behavior. And honestly, innovation is great, but what underlies the innovation is hard work. And you bring together resources that have been there, people that have done these things and can provide real value. You focus on a few critical things. We know that we can't be all things to all people. I think that Confucius meant to say this. I'm not sure he really said it, but I thought it was cute. And then you build a culture, and this is central to this whole venture, because if you don't get the culture right, nothing else really matters. And it's about effort and sticking to it and being proud of what you're creating and understanding that not everything works out, but you fail forward and you learn how to do these things. And it's about excellence, but this idea of failure is really critical, because in our schools, in education today, by and large, failure is not a good thing. But if you look at the rest of the world, failure is the process that we get better in every single instance, whether it's sports, whether it's games, anything and everything, we get better by doing. And so the culture that we want to build, the culture that is so critical, is contagious. And it's really interesting, because when you bring people into an environment like this, a special environment, you change their behavior, and it's amazing how quickly they adopt the new way of behaving. And this is what we want them to take away. We want to make them into special people. And so you don't build these kinds of places with a rule book. You don't build them basically with a handbook, because it would be insufferably long. You build them because you say to people, this is what we expect of you. Go get it done. We can't tell you how to do it because those solutions haven't even been invented yet. So it's this idea of excellence, it's this idea of having standards and expectations that is part of the culture. And it's also a desire to shoot for tomorrow. Yesterday is behind us. We all understand that, but the goal is to have every student who leaves there saying, I understand that other people couldn't get this done, but that doesn't bind me. That doesn't make it impossible for me to be successful. And then you have to give them the skills that are going to matter tomorrow. And it's not going to be memorizing because of Google. It's not going to be doing things in the way that it used to be done. It's going to be, how do we make them into really entrepreneurial thinkers? How do we make them into people that are going to make a difference? And here's the most important single thing that we've discovered. When companies tell us about the most valuable employees, they're not the employees who have the answers. They're not the employees who have the answers. They're the employees who ask the tough questions, who are the thought provokers, the ones who are saying, why haven't we done it this way, or why can't we do it this way? And then lastly, it has to be a real business. And Ed reminds me of this every day. It has to actually pay for itself. It has to stand on its own two legs. And it can't be simply because people are rooting for you. I always say there's a difference between contributors and people who are really committed. The chicken, I think, makes a contribution, but the pig makes sort of a real commitment. And so in doing this and building this kind of a place, it has to deliver real value to all of you, to everybody in this room. It has to make for great employees. It has to make for a real difference. And everybody can get to be a part of this, because what you discover is that vision is, again, contagious, and it attracts opportunities, and it attracts supports. And so we're very excited. We know it works. Let me tell you how it works. Just to give you an idea, when we survey IIT alums, their mid-career earnings are more than graduates from Northwestern, from Notre Dame, and from the University of Chicago. Pretty amazing. When we look at how transformational this place is, and if there's one thing that is really central to the vision here, it's when you can take thousands of folks who come from the lowest 20% of the income levels in this city, and you can end up in a process where they're in the top 20%. That changes their lives. And that's really important. And as I said, this idea and the way people keep score, we're number 2 across all of the metrics in highly selective colleges in changing lives. And that's really, really critical when you have the opportunity to have so many of these folks coming in and doing that. And then there's this little voice that says, how do you pay for it? Okay. Well, here's the good news. The good news is that innovation always pays for itself. And we're going to be building these kinds of solutions. I like to talk about J.P. Morgan. We have a law school. I pity the lawyers. So the new machines are in seconds doing what used to take hundreds of thousands of hours for the lawyers to do. We have companies now that are using phones to do collision estimating and sending that information. Allstate just recently eliminated all their drive-ins and about 500 adjusters. Today, that system in 3 days settles these losses instead of 3 weeks, 20 estimates a day instead of a couple. And it's important to understand this difference between invention and innovation. Invention is pretty costly. It's important. It's part of the sciences of discovery and everything else, but it's very expensive. Innovation is something that's immediately accessible, that has an immediate return, and it's about being modest in a way, doing things incrementally better, but continuing to do those. And Warren Buffett always says, you know, he would love to be a high jumper and jump over 7-foot high things, but he prefers to like step over 1-foot bars. So this thing is that innovation is a popular word. It's not so well understood. We think that we can help that. We can improve what people have come to understand about innovation. And there's a new way that you have to think about technology. And in doing that, it's not simply to say we're going to build systems that help us do what we've always done a little better. What it's really about is how can we use these new tools to do things that we never imagined were possible. And so we want to focus on those kinds of things, on solutions incorporating design, and the Institute of Design is moving back to the campus and will be part of the Kaplan Institute. Couldn't be more excited about having all the resources in one place and to apply those in important ways, and also to understand that you do this in a way that is a repeatable process and a very valuable process. So, you know, when we look out, people say all the time, you know, it is what it is. And we say, you know, the world actually isn't what it is. The world actually is what we make it. And so I don't have like a view that this is going to happen in 10 minutes. I don't think that's how the world works. But I think if we get started, that we can build something that will be remarkably valuable and important for the city, for the students, for the businesses in here, for everyone who's a part of it. And then I always have sort of this ultimate satisfaction of saying, that even if you think it sucks today, come see me in a couple of years when your life has changed, and I'll remember you. So thank you very much. I'm good.
Okay.
Is this mine?
Yep, that's yours. Oh, to be in the mind of Howard Tullman. Can you imagine just for a day? I feel bad for the author, William Purvis, the Lycan guy. The books are still not sold. That's amazing. Amanda, Latrice, do we have any other questions? None? Really? Okay, just a few. Oh, I have some. Did you write yours down? Okay, well, write it. You have a couple of minutes to write it down.
Okay. Your new building looks pretty reputable. What would you say are the unique parts of the design that's going to help support the mission?
So I guess I'll repeat that question, which wasn't written down. For the video. So the question was, what are the unique elements of the building that will really be consistent with the mission? Well, first of all, there are virtually no walls. So there are enormous areas for project-based learning, for interdisciplinary work, for interactions. What you discover about change is the real change happens at the intersections, at the collisions. And so you want to engineer and build areas where these happy accidents occur, where you'll have people, because what we see all the time now is the technology jumps from industry to industry. The opportunities move so quickly. So we don't say that Uber is a better cab company. We say it's a different transportation solution, or that Tesla is not a car with a few chips. It's a computer on wheels. And watching industries, when you see something in retail that two weeks from now will be employed in healthcare, you discover that the bar continues to rise, that having proximity to all these different solutions is really critical. And the building is designed in that fashion. So, yeah.
I did want to just take a moment just to recognize Mr. Kaplan. I think you should stand up. Okay, so this question is from Terry Lanier. Am I saying that name right? Lonier, okay. I did take French, actually. So, she is a member, and she's with a company called Chroma. How has the Chicago ecosystem changed since the time you joined 1871, and how will that impact your work at Illinois Tech?
Okay. So we keep score, and Bob Rifkin is here, so he can tell me whether I get these numbers right or not. But we measure the last 6 years in a couple of ways in terms of the ecosystem of the city. The first is in terms of the tech sector, which has grown from about 2% of the Chicago economy to about 13%. That represents about 165,000 jobs. In addition, it represents about 9 million square feet of real estate in terms of the central business district. Chicago is really on the map. Now, there are no businesses that aren't tech-enabled in some senses, but it's really changed the conversation to one that is not simply about the coast, but that includes Chicago. In 1871 is now the #1 ranked incubator in the world. There are about 1,800 of those things, but we are #1 in the world. And it's important because I think people didn't think of Chicago. They thought of Chicago in a lot of ways, but they didn't think of it as a technology hub. Now, IIT is in fact a technology school, and so we think that the opportunity, the growth in all of these tech businesses is really important, again, for the vision that Alan has expressed, which is how do we empower these people to be successful in life. And the demand from those companies, every single one of which says, we need more engineers, we need more diversity, we need more entrepreneurial thinking, we need more innovation. We want to be the source for all of those things. So that's how IIT sees this really expansive economy in Chicago.
The next question is from Ruth Warnema. She is a City Club member, and she's with the Neighborhood Capital Institute. Do you see tech growth issues impacted by unreliable power to data centers as a result to climate change, or because the capacity is not there? For example, the 350 East Cermak backup power is diesel?
Right. Okay, so this is why I didn't have a cookie for dessert. Because I saw this question and I said, I have no idea of how to answer that. All I can say is a couple of things about that. Power is critical, reliable power, very critical. We generate some astonishing number in terms of solar power already on the campus. The Kaplan Institute is a flat roof. This is another opportunity to deploy solar. We think that this is part of the solution, the smart grid and all of the things that are going on. But on the technical aspects of that, I have no clue as to what or how to answer it.
So the moderator may or may not have understood that question. Just saying. The next question is from David Radowitz. What are the factors that make a location favorable for a factory of the future? Is Chicago a more favorable location for the factories of the future than the surrounding suburbs or states? You kind of talked about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think that for all the reasons that I said, I think it's favorable. But one of the things to really understand is that Chicago's economy overall is not single-threaded. Chicago has a ridiculously diverse thing where no sector is more than about 13%. And as a result, we can welcome almost any kind of business and create opportunities for them. If you were on the West Coast and you weren't in a media business or in certain other kinds of businesses, you would be in the wrong place. If you want to do a medical device business, maybe you go to Boston. If you want to do fashion or some aspects of finance, maybe you go to New York City. But what's so amazing about the Chicago economy is how robust it is across so many different areas, whether it's logistics or finance or all these different kinds of areas. So I think that it's a highly favorable thing. And the other thing that we're seeing is that we are a tremendously talented workforce. We're loyal, we stick around, we're seeing a boomerang effect, which is technology and engineers and scientists and startup entrepreneurs after 3 or 4 years on either of the coast are actually coming back to Chicago because standard of living, cost of living, the community elements are far more attractive. I mean, I think they are realistically understanding that it's difficult to think about how you would build a life on either of the coast as compared to here, especially if this is where you started.
And so the moderator may or may not understand this question either. David Matineer is asking, you know, Jeff or Jack, I probably should have had you guys up here because I really don't understand this. Will you have a relationship with the UI Labs DMD2?
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of D's and M's. And
Okay, on Goose Island, or will you do the same or different from them?
Right, okay.
Okay.
So I think that the intention of the Institute is to be a launch pad that would be a feeder to the UI Labs, which is, by the way, University Industry Labs, not University of Illinois Labs. A feeder to 1871, a feeder to M-Hub, a feeder to all of the different incubators and environments that exist throughout the city. It's not intended to be exclusive. It's really intended to move projects along. And one of the visions that's really important is when a student does leave, they may leave to start their own business. We hope that some will. They may leave to be part of a team that has been very successful in working with corporations on projects while they were at school, or they may just be and have a new set of these entrepreneurial skills and go and be employed in a traditional way at a traditional business. All of those outcomes are enhanced by this experiential learning idea and by sort of the education that they're going to get at the Kaplan Institute. So we would expect to be collaborative and cooperative with everything that's going on out there and to create sort of linkages. We work now, we have a huge conference coming up in, I want to say October, right, John? Where we're bringing together 200 or 300 different colleges, all of whom have entrepreneurial centers / incubator kinds of solutions to do sort of an exchange of best ideas and best practices and information sharing. And, IIT will be at the hub of that enterprise. And of course, that's one of the ways that we see these, the hub and spokes sharing everything that's going on across not only the city, but really across the country.
Okay, so now we have more questions, what we'll have time for, so I'm gonna go really quick. Ashvin Ladd wants to know, what do you read every day?
Okay. Ashvin, I've asked you not to come to these luncheons anymore. So I read, probably 5 or 10 different publications, and I read, every evening I read some sort of recreational reading, but all the journals and things like that. I think the biggest challenge about the flow of information is filtering and figuring out which few things you can, reliably and sort of build into your routine. But it's hard to keep up. But we do, we do a lot of reading.
So my friends at the Bronzeville Community Development Partnership say, do you know how excited the community is for you to be in Bronzeville and meet you at the intersections? If you don't, they're pretty excited.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah.
We're excited.
There are a ton of good questions, and we're not going to get to all of them, but this one's really good. Christine Camright? If you leave, I don't always ask your question, but this is a really good one. So I'm going to ask it. From the Right Foundation, what effect do you see the environment of anti-immigration on talent acquisition for what you've talked about today?
So it's a huge issue. It's an issue for every university in terms of visas and in terms of incoming classes. It's, as I said before, immigrants and have been an essential part of the growth of the technology community, the growth of the startup community. So it's not good news, but on the other hand, it's not the only group that we can sort of serve and empower and make successful. And so we hope that there won't be like a standstill in terms of the influx, but I'm very encouraged. We just had a report that our undergraduate population for this coming fall is growing way more than we expected, and those are principally domestic students. So it's an interesting thing, and of course they're from every walk of life and from every sort of economic strata. So it hasn't impacted us. I think that all of the visa issues are going to be significant for the tech community, but for the moment we're pretty encouraged.
There are so many good questions, and we just don't have time. There's a legislative question. There's one about UIC, the engineering campus. There's so much, but I guess we got to figure out a way to get you to answer these maybe sometime later.
Okay.
So the last one I'm going to ask is, well, let's see here.
Is this from Charlie?
Yeah, well, that's not the, we're going to ask 2 more, because Dr. Mangini wants to know what degree programs will be offered in conjunction with the activities at the KI. And then there's one more.
So this is not intended to be, its own enterprise in terms of degrees. It's intended to be sort of additive and supplementary to all of the existing programs and things. Now, having said that, hopefully the faculty and all of the folks, the new provost, will help develop new programs and new certificates. There's a tremendous demand at the graduate level for certifications across a lot of these new technology areas. So, and I want to also say that the Vandercook School is immediately adjacent to our new Kaplan Center, and it has really attractive restrooms as compared to the little blue porta potties that are on our construction site. And so, Charlie, I'm forever in your debt.
So we promise that no one will leave this room after you answer this question and tell anybody what you're going to say.
Okay.
And we promise that the live feed, we won't share this. But Sandy Stein wants to know, what are the chances of getting into that?
So we continue to be very optimistic. We on the merits, we're the best place. My own view is if there's a different consideration that enters into it, it may be that the largest existential threat to Amazon is political and regulatory, and so it may very well be that they locate in the environs of Washington, D.C. for a lot of different reasons. But on the merits, the choice should be Chicago.